the height of the building is going to ruin their view from the other side of the river. What do you say to those people?
I'll get them to go knock on someone's door and speak to the actual people affected by this.
This building, which was built in the 80s, is no longer fit for purpose.
If you live in London, spend a third of your income renting a pokey flat and are expecting to spend the next 30 years of your life saving for a deposit to buy a place of your own, you've probably wondered, why can't we just build more bloody houses? The incredibly high cost of housing in London is a pure supply and demand problem. Over the last 25 years, the population of the capital has grown by 29%, while housing stock has only grown by 23%. And given that the capital generates around a quarter of UK GDP, London's housing shortage affects the whole country. It also just makes lives more miserable than they need to be. The government recognises this and is committed to reform the planning system to build 1.5 million more homes over the next 5 years. But the previous target of 300,000 new homes a year has never been reached, and the target for London overall has actually been revised down. So if everyone knows that London needs more houses, why are they so hard to build?
A major reason for this is a planning system that makes it far too easy for anything from rock stars to rare spiders to get in the way of new development. And this building behind me is no exception. This is Battersea Bridge. It's an unlovely 1980s office block that's no longer fit for purpose. A developer has a planning application in to turn it into 110 new houses plus restaurants, commercial space and opening up this riverside. 50% of those new houses will be available for social rent. That's new homes for 190 people in an area with a social housing waiting list of 13,500 people. The problem? It's going to be 29 stories high, and this has led to objections from people living in Chelsea on the other side of the river, one of the most expensive places to live in the world, let alone in London, who claim that it's going to ruin their view. People like Mick, Jagger, Clapton and Alys have signed a petition calling for this entire scheme to be scrapped.
Chris Worrell is a Labour councillor and affordable housing campaigner. I asked him what he'd say to the rock stars over the river who are opposing the scheme.
Only if they were able to do that, they might be looking at things in a bit of a different light. They're coming from a very privileged position, they're rich, they're wealthy, and if they're prioritising their views over these types of residents, then I would tell them that they need to think about it again. At the end of the day, we set these policies out for getting a public benefit from these schemes, and of course if people go and buy their pizza or the sourdough bread, people aren't complaining about the profit those bakeries are making, or even if it's a car or a pint of beers.
Chris is understandably anxious to see affordable houses delivered, but of course the only way to make a scheme like this viable is to sell the remaining properties for profit. And in London, where ground space is constrained, that means building up, as Nicholas Mee, the developer behind the project, explained to me.
We've faced a lot of opposition locally on both sides of the river. To a degree that's not unexpected. What we are bringing forward here is a substantial proposal. I think a lot of local residents have had questions regarding the proposed height of the building, which is obviously typically quite an emotive topic. And there's been a lot of questions raised around how the construction process would be managed post-planning and how we could mitigate disturbances in terms of logistical and access into the site. That's something which we've had to address as part of our application and would also need to address in further detail if we were to secure a resolution to grant planning. There's 300,000 people on housing lists in London and over 170,000 people in short-term accommodation. The national government and the local council have made clear that brownfield sites like this are going to be the key to optimising housing delivery. So I suppose our message to those would be, if housing can't be delivered on sites like this, then where can it?
5,000 people have signed a petition opposing the scheme, calling it vast and vulgar, grotesque, and raising concerns about traffic disruption during the construction period. That's not unusual. Complaints like this typically accompany any new development project. After all, who wants to live near a building site? But the difference now is that Rachel Reeves has made planning reform central to her economic agenda, promising to stop blockers get in the way of new development. So perhaps a test of how serious she really is about growth will be whether we see more buildings like Battersea Bridge pop up across London, or whether those residents of Wandsworth still on the waiting list for housing, to paraphrase Mick Jagger, can't get no satisfaction.